Hey guys, we're going to be adding the functionality to register users on our website. So the first thing we're going to do is set up the backend for it and then create a register form where they call the GraphQL mutation we're about to create. So the first thing we're going to do is head over to our user schema and instead of create user, we're going to call this register. And it's going to take a username, email, and password, and we can return a user. And then in our user resolver, what we're going to do is instead of create user, we're going to say, and you know what, we'll just return a boolean for now of just whether it was successful or not. And then over here in our register function, we can't just create a user. And the reason for that is we don't want to store the password as plain text. We want to first hash it. So to hash passwords, it's recommended to use a crypto library, and the one we're going to be using is called bcrypt. So this is what it looks like right here, and we can see we can call bcrypt.hash. It'll hash the password, and then we're going to store that in our database, the hashed password. So to install this, I have in the server folder, and I'm going to say yarn add bcrypt. And I'm just going to copy this right here. So hash is the function we're going to be using, and right here you can notice that they have compare. That's what we're going to use to log in and compare the hashed passwords. So paste this guy in here, and we're going to import bcrypt from bcrypt. And let's make sure we spell that right. There we go. So bcrypt.hash. I like to use async and await, so we're going to use that instead of a callback because I believe it should return a promise. If not, it should return a promise or just be synchronous, which we're good either way. So here's where we want to put our password. So in our arguments, we could say password and then other arguments. And so we're going to await const hashed password. So we're going to hash the password here, passing in their password. And then this is salt rounds. Salt rounds basically is how many times I believe it hashes it, and the more salt you add or salt rounds, the longer it takes. I've heard 12 is like a good standard. That's not too long, but is also because the longer you put here, the longer it takes to hash the password. So you don't want to make it too long, but the longer you make it, the more secure it is, I believe. So what I've heard, general advice is you want to make this number as high as your server can afford it to be. And that is without taking too much impact. So I'm going to put it at 12. I think that's a pretty good number. And then once we have the hashed password, now we can go ahead and insert our user into our database. So we're going to do a try catch statement. If we get an error, we're going to return false. And we're going to put the hash password in here as well. If we have a problem hashing the password for any reason, we should return false. And then after we hash the password, we're going to call await on models.user.create. We're going to pass in the ... other arguments, and then also the hashed password. So that will create our user. If we wanted to, we could say const user and do something with our user, but we don't need to. And then we're just going to return true if that works. So our backend should be good to go. Here's the log. I don't see any red. I don't see any errors, so it looks like we're good. I'm going to first come over to graphical and see if I can create a user. So I'm going to refresh. And we're going to say mutation register. Username is going to be Bob. Email is going to be john@bob.com. And my password is socks. And we'll go ahead and run this. It returned true, so it worked. And now in our database, we're not storing socks. I'll show you. So if I type pSQL, I can connect to the Slack database, and then I can select all from users, and we can see all our users. So the password before, you'll notice we were storing, and looks like something got messed up. So select password from users. What we should see for this third column is here's the problem. We need to actually set password equal to hash password. So we don't have a property called hashed password. It's called password in our database. So we need to set that to this property. Now that'll rerun, and we can try creating this again. So this is Bob2. Created it okay. Now let's do a select, and you notice we don't see socks as the password. We actually see this hash. So now we're protected. We don't just expose everyone's passwords if we get hacked or something gets leaked. Awesome. So we're done with that, and our backend is all set and good to go with registering users. So I'm going to switch over to the client because we're going to be doing a few things with that. So I said we're going to create a register form. To do this, we're going to use a UI library. We're going to be using Semantic UI. There's a lot of other ones. I use Material UI sometimes, but I really like this one, so we're going to use it for this tutorial. It's really easy to use. And to install it, we're going to just copy this command right here, which says yarn add semantic UI react. And we actually need to install two things, so I'm not going to hit enter quite yet. We also need to install the CSS. We can either copy this link and put it in our public directory, but what I like to do better is actually just install it using this, installing the package and importing it this way. This is just a better way. You'll bundle basically your React application with this Semantic UI CSS, so you don't have to fetch it for every single time. You have it already bundled. Okay. Because this link has to go to this URL to get the Semantic UI every time otherwise. Alrighty, so we have those installed. How do we actually do stuff with them? Well, first we want to import the CSS that we just added. So in our index file here, we are just going to add an import. We're going to add an import. So now we imported this CSS, and now we can use it wherever we want. So I'm going to create a new route called register. And we'll put it at the path register, and we're going to call this guy register. And now in my register component here, I'm going to import React from React. And what we'd like to do is create a class called register, which extends from React.component. And we don't use from keyword there. And we're going to be rendering. So the reason why I am making this a class instead of a peer function is because we are going to be doing, so export default register, we're going to be doing some state things in this. So we're going to keep the state of our application. So in our form, we're going to have a couple things: a username field, a email field, and a password field. So as the user is typing these fields out, we are keeping track of them in the state, and we need to make this a class so we can keep track of this. Alright, so now in our render function, what we're going to do is we're going to return our form. And so we're going to put our form, and we're going to get this from Semantic UI. So the first thing I'm going to do is get a container. I kind of like how you have a bunch of white padding on the side, so I'm going to use this text container. So if you click this little thing on their website, it'll show you the code that you use, and it's just a container. And we can add a little register if we want to. So we can copy this. We can also use a header and say this is our register form. So register, and then here we're going to put our actual components. So input component, at the top here are all the props we can use, and then here are the actual fields. So we're just going to use a standard input field, nothing fancy. So we're going to copy that. And I do think I want it like a full width one. Let's see if they have that. Here we go, it's called fluid. Okay, so I just add the fluid to input. So we're also going to import in here the input. And I'm going to say input placeholder is equal to email. Actually, let's do username first. And this is going to be fluid. So now let's just see what this looks like. I'm going to just run npm start in this directory, and that should start everything up. Okay, yeah. So now I'm going to do /register. And awesome, we see our first form field. And now I'm going to close this and put this 3 more times. So email and then password. Now with the password, we want to put the type of password so no one actually sees that we're typing in a password. And then we want to const grab the username, email, and password from our state. And now we're going to set the value. So value is equal to username. But this guy is going to be email. So as the values are changing in our state, we have to actually, before this, do an onChange function too. Oops, there we go. And then here's going to be our onChange. So this is going to take an event, and we're going to pass in this .onChange. So as we're typing in this input field, our onChange function is going to be called. So this guy's going to get called as I type in the username field. It's going to come to this function up here, which it's passed an event. The event tells us we can get event.target.name. This will tell us the name. So I can put name is equal to username, and the name here, and the name, oops, here, and name password. And here's going to be email. Okay, so we can get the name field, and we want the names here to line up with our state names here. So that way I can say I can say const name and value is equal to e.target. So a value is the current value that is in the input field, and name is this thing right here. So then I can say this dot set state name and then value. Now you'll notice how I put curly or brackets around the name. So the reason for that, if name is equal to for example email, we want to use the prop name here, email, and not name. So really this will get turned into email is equal to the value, or if this is the username, it'll be username. And we can leave the comment in, and then the value is going to be given to us here. And this basically, the reason why I'm doing it this way is just to save on having to write 3 onChange functions. So that saves a little bit of time. Okay, so let's see if this works. So I'm typing, stuff is getting entered, and if you have React Dev Tools, we notice our type password worked. We're seeing that. If you have React Dev Tools, you can go to the register component, and we can just see the state, and we can notice all our stuff is recorded there. Awesome. So the last thing we want to do is add a little button at the bottom where they can submit. Alright. And let's do just a regular old button. So button. And I'm going to say submit. And then when this is clicked, we want to call a function. I'm going to call this onSubmit. And all we're going to do for now is console log the state so we can see all the values as when we submit. And we'll pass that function in. Okay. So come back over here. We see our submit button. I can see the username, so we can say bob1, bob2 at bob.com, and some password. And when I hit submit, we get the JSON, email, password, username. So really that's what we wanted to use to make our GraphQL mutation to our server. So the rest is super easy. So I'm going to just import GQL and GraphQL from React Apollo. And we're going to just do a mutation here. So register mutation is going to be equal to GQL, and here's where we're going to put our mutation. I'm going to go ahead and write this in graphical because it just makes it a little bit easier, because it auto-completes a few fields and prettifies it. So we need to pass in variables. So to do variables, you add a little parentheses here next to the mutation name, and then you do a $, so username and then the name of it, and then you have to put the value. And this needs to match what the value is of the parameter down here. So username is a string that is non-null. We have email, and you make sure you need to do a $. So string there, and password there. And now to pass it in, you just pass in your variable. Username, email, password. Copy this, paste it here. Now we just need to inject the mutation into our component. So we use the higher order component GraphQL, and we tell it we want to inject it with the register mutation, and then we pass in our component here, which is called register. So then this higher order component will pass a mutate prop. So here we can say this.props.mutate, and then we can pass in any variables we want to mutate with. So variables is going to be this.state. And because we did the same naming convention on our server, we don't have to make any changes. We can just submit like that. And we can make this an async function and await the response, and we can console.log the response. Okay, so we'll call this bob3 at gmail.com, and bob3 as a password. Go ahead and submit this. We get data back. It says the register is true. Now I can come back here. I can say pSQL, can connect to my Slack database and see if my user was correctly added. So select all from users, and an ID of 5. So select all from users, where ID is equal to 5. We can see our bob3 user was successfully added here. We see the username, email we just added. So that's great. So we finished creating our little register form here. At least the mutation works. It's not quite done, but that's where we'll leave it for now. We're going to make a few changes to it in the next video. We're going to be handling errors, also clearing the form when we submit, and going to a different page. Because usually when you submit and you get a response of good, you want to direct them to another page in your application. So that's it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching. As always, the code is going to be up on GitHub.